Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Trent Smith, the Executive Director of the Franklinton Board of Trade, and I want to welcome you to episode number 4 of our Franklintennial podcast series celebrating the 225th birthday of Franklinton. Before we get started with our guest today, I want to recognize the folks that are making this possible. We want to thank Jim Fia Productions for all of the equipment and the expertise at recording our conversations. We want to thank the Franklintennial Committee who supported this idea and helped us fundraise for it. We want to thank Land Grant for letting us use their beautiful venue with all kinds of activities and great background noise. Such a great spot for this neighborhood, and we're happy to be doing these podcasts from this location. And then we want to thank our financial sponsors, Kaufman Development and Casto, two developers who have been pretty integral in the last several years with what's going on in the neighborhood. We also want to recognize 4 interns that are helping Jim Fia today. They are interns from Transit Art, and they are through Gladden Community House, and they are working with Jim Fia today to learn the art of production. And those interns are Ella Faribaugh, Grace Turner, Trinity Maddox, and Delson Stone Queen. So we thank them for their participation and their expertise today, and we're happy they have this learning experience. So today, my guests are two of, I think I say this every time we start an episode, 2 of my favorite people in the neighborhood, who have been very integral in a lot of what has happened here recently. And I'm very pleased to welcome Chris Sherman and Marty Johnson. And Marty, I would like you to start with us today and just give us kind of a brief description of who you are, maybe when you got to the neighborhood, and a little bit about your affiliation with the neighborhood.
Well, I got to the neighborhood in 2009 and almost immediately got involved in the Franklinton Board of Trade through their gala and auction. And that came about because I told you I had been an artist at 400 West Rich.
That's right.
And I have been donating to your auction every year since.
You certainly have. Beautiful pieces.
And I met Chris Sherman at the, going back, Jim Sweeney made a post about the Franklinton art community. And so I made contact with him, and he pushed me right off on Jim Sherm to inquire. Now, this was like in April, and I posted my name and number right on the studio that I wanted. Mm-hmm. And several months later, I became one of the first tenants at 400.
Yeah, you were one of the very original tenants, right?
Yeah. I've been there for more than 10 years.
More than 10 years, yeah. So you have clearly made your mark and made your presence known within the art community of Franklinton, and I know you've been on the area commission. You've supported the Board of Trade. You've been active in community cleanups and all kinds of things. So
the Little League. I was part of the Campbell crew of 2. You
were the Campbell crew too. You were one of the mightiest teams we had out there. Yeah, that's right. Well, cool. Well, we're really glad you're here. We're going to hear more of your story here in just a little bit.
Sure.
Chris, give us just a few minutes about when you got to the neighborhood and what your affiliation is. What do you do?
Yeah, well, just say this is exciting. I've never done something like this before, and I appreciate the opportunity to participate. I came to the neighborhood in 2004. I grew up in the Short North area, was living in Old Town East at the time, and was really just looking for shop space and studio space and a new place to call home, and found a wonderful little building on McDowell. I think the statute of limitations has run out on that. I think I could really talk about that these days. But yeah, they moved in over there back in 2004, and just kind of, my parents were deeply involved in the revitalization efforts of the Short North and the Victorian Village neighborhood, so that was sort of in my blood, and
Sure.
It was parties, events, art, all of that stuff, parents being artists, this, that, and the other. So it just kind of came natural, and got to know Jim Sweeney when he was with the Franklinton Development Association at the time, and we started a nonprofit arts organization along with several other people, and the Franklinton Arts District, which is still around today and thriving,
still booming,
and doing great things. And so over the years, just sort of continued to have our fun, and had an opportunity to redevelop some property behind me, which is known as 400 West Rich. A gentleman out of California named Lance Robbins came kind of knocking on doors around the same time I had moved down here, but he really wasn't doing much, for the first few years, and that's okay. And he was going through some processes there, and I think it was around 2009 was when we had pulled the trigger on the project, and it's the rest is kind of history. So here we are.
Absolutely, and I do just want to point out that it's almost always that when I talk to somebody about how they got involved in Franklinton, it always involves, well, I was talking to Jim Sweeney.
Of course.
Because that's how I got here too.
Yeah.
Well, great. This is going to be a great episode because to remind everyone that the first episode was we kind of covered 1797 to 1913. So the founding of the neighborhood to the first kind of big modern day flood. 1913 to about 1978, 1980, when the floodplain designation was instituted by FEMA. And then we went from, in the last episode, the third episode, we did 1980 to about 2004 and 5, when the flood wall got done and the expectations were very high for the neighborhood. So now we're talking about basically 2004 to what's going on today. And undeniably, without question, one of the most impactful things that happened to this neighborhood that started this process was the creation of an arts district. And both of you being, key players in that. Chris, I'd like to start with you and just kind of tell me sort of how did that start? What was I know there were reasons behind the need for a new place for artists to be. Mm-hmm. And I'd just like to kind of let everyone know what was the genesis of making that happen.
Sure. I would say that, demand for creative space in this city was very high. There was a wonderful project and organization and facility in Grandview called Junction View Studios, and they had about 40 units spread out over about 15,000 square feet. It wasn't the biggest space. I'm sorry, about 30,000 square feet. It wasn't the largest space, but it was programmed constantly, big events. Adam, lots of other people there that were very integral in getting that, maintaining and facilitating all of that activity there, and then Nationwide Realty started purchasing up all of the property and ended up buying their building. And there was going to be a sort of a large displacement within the creative community that needed to be, filled. And that was one of the reasons. I mean, that wasn't the main reason why we did 400 West Rich. That was, we were already hosting events in the neighborhood, and there was demand and, critical mass building for facilities to sort of help continue all of that programming that we were already doing. Mm-hmm. As the Franklinton Arts District. For instance, where the Vanderelli Room is now, that was we were hosting FAD events there, from 2007 to 2008, 2009, and after parties, gallery events, things of that nature. I was hosting instant gallery events at my house on McDowell, and it just after Lance had finally closed on the building in 2009, I said, well, this just makes sense. I mean, we should do studios. The building is, obviously set up to be compartmentalized that way. And he said, okay, well, will you come work for me? And I said, well, and I had a construction business at the time, and I said, yeah, sure. The economy kind of tanked.
That was kind of a rough time. Yeah,
I wasn't doing those. I had a store in the short north called Counterculture, and I sold kitchen, countertop material and cabinets, and we did kitchen and bath design, and that really slowed way down. I mean, we weren't doing those $150,000 kitchens anymore. So we ended up, I wanted to take the business in a different direction. My partner didn't want to do it, so I bailed on that. Went back into construction, and that kind of 6 or 7 months later, approached Lance about this opportunity to redevelop the space over there in the studios.
Sure.
And he said, "Fine, sounds great. Let's do it. Here's $1,000." And I'm like, "What the hell am I supposed to do with $1,000? There's a tree growing out of the building, you know." But we did it, you know.
Yeah.
You know, Zach Henkel, who's been, you know, a very good friend of mine, and he has been with us since day one down here.
Yeah.
You know, he's worked with me. You know, we're both coworkers there. We've been there probably 11 years now, so we started working on the building. Of course, we were throwing parties and events and bands, and you know, and that kind of led to the next, stage of that project, where it was like, well, listen, like, you know, we're gonna get shut down. You know, like the cops are gonna come. We're like, people are smoking cigarettes in here. We're drinking. We're getting crazy all night long. And I thought, well, why? Let's open up a bar, and that's where Chris Howell came involved, and Chris was running the old church where the Vanderelli room is now, and he was there with his wife Shibnam at the time. Well, they weren't married at the time, but you know, they were there, and you know, there's just great energy going on in the neighborhood. You know, there was another spot down the street called Club Sandwich, you know, where there's big parties and whatever. I mean, there was a neat little kind of environment down here. So it, you know, Chris got on board and you know, completely developed the restaurant. You know, that was pretty much his entire, you know, child in terms of, you know, business development to branding and all of that. And that, you know, and that's been for a while. And I still kind of consider it sort of the living room of the neighborhood, you know,
Sure.
At least of this immediate area. But yeah, I mean, that's sort of, that's how sort of some of this stuff started. So
Great. So Marty, you are a part of the Franklinton Arts District today, but you were an artist before you ever came to Franklinton. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your photography career and some of the cool things that you did back in the day that sort of, you know, led to your, you know, lifelong love of art and creating.
Well, I've always been a creator. I started in school doing cartoons, and when I was 12, I was given a complete oil painting set, and so I started oil painting at a young age. Then I got into making jewelry, and my brother wanted the jewelry making stuff, so I traded with him for all his darkroom stuff. My dad gave me a camera, and I had the darkroom, so I started pursuing photography. I became a photojournalist in Hartford, Connecticut, and I was doing a lot of local photographs until the Civic Center caved in, and then boxing became very big in the Hartford Civic Center, and I had my own corner on the ring, and I became quite a boxing photographer. I've been published in Ring magazine.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that. Yeah.
I have some fantastic photographs of Muhammad Ali.
You sure do. I've seen a couple of them, and they're awesome.
And other big name boxers who came through. It wasn't until a boxing death occurred in front of me, in front of my camera. When I went back, I decided that was the end of it for me. I did not want my talents to promote such a negative sports where brains were being battered about the inside of the skulls. So
Sure.
I stopped doing that. However, when I came to Columbus in 1980, for 4 years I worked for Downtown Alive newspaper as an assignment photographer.
Okay.
So I really have a lot of 1980 pictures of Columbus.
Oh, that's cool.
no, that's awesome.
That's pretty
that
neat.
were all published in Downtown Alive newspaper. So I have a portfolio of that. From there, I found that my eyes were changing. You know how it happens when you get older. You have
Sure.
to have bifocals. And my SLR was not automatic focusing. So my negatives turned out to be a little fuzzy. And you cannot make a good photograph with fuzzy negatives.
No. Yeah.
So I had to give it up. Yeah. I went to Columbus College of Art and Design, and since the photography class was full, I signed up for a class in lithography, having no idea what it was, but it sounded like photography, so I signed up
Sure,
for it.
it rhymed.
And it turned out to be creating prints on huge stones that was developed back several hundred years ago and used mainly for reproducing music because it could be drawn on the stone and then...
Interesting. Okay.
Up until that time, printing presses could print type, but not photographs as we know it. So a lot of steel engravings were done to illustrate, say, during the Civil War and battles and things like that. That's where that came from. So I was learning all about printmaking.
Yeah.
And I continued to take the classes in printmaking. I really enjoyed the lithography and etching. Not so much for screen printing, although I tried everything while I was there. I took classes for 10 years at night. I was a constant student at CCA Day. And then when Kathy Kelly and I have been knowing each other for like 40 years, and she teaches Bob Ross. She's a certified teacher to Bob Ross.
She did a presentation at one of our luncheons,
And two of us were looking for a place on the west side where we could probably share a studio when I read in the newspaper that this gentleman was talking about 400 West Ridge Street. And he kicked me right over to Sherm here.
Yeah.
And that was when we signed up.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I love that story, and I really wanted you to tell the story about your photography experience with Ring Magazine, and some of the great photos you have of Muhammad Ali. I mean, truly a historic figure, and you were front and center when he was young in his career. So that's pretty neat.
I was not only front and center to get that picture.
Yeah.
I was on top of the chairs.
You were on top of the chairs.
Because all of the men in front of me, which were all around Muhammad, they were all 6-footers. And I could not see over them. So I climbed up on the chair in the ballroom, and I did my...
so you figured it out. That's good stuff. I love it.
From a high vantage point, I got my pictures.
I love it. I love it. Well, so you both have art in your pedigree. You have been a fan of art since day one. Chris, you had experience growing up with two parents that both did art and really were part of that whole vibe. So talk to me about why is art so important in Franklinton? What made this work so well for this neighborhood? And I have some follow-up questions, but I want to start with that. Like, we're just talking about where this really kind of like morphed out of, this little area right here that we're sitting in. What makes it so important? Chris, I'll go ahead and start.
Well, I mean, for me, it was just sort of a natural, art has always been it's always been my social time. It's always been my, it's all of my friends are artists. I've immersed my entire life and existence within that community and within that industry. So for me, it just was sort of a natural thing to turn to when I wanted to do activities and things in the neighborhood. I mean, I'm no stranger to the party, so it's like, to me, that just sort of just art and that came natural. So the way that the city has embraced it over the years, with the creation and the adoption of the East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan and all of that stuff, and creating the unified zoning district and all of that down here, that was something that I wouldn't have imagined, happening back in 2004 to 2005, and that's just been a great, fantastic addition and a way to solidify the arts in this neighborhood. And not only has it, fostering and encouraging and creating, all of this creative activity down here is not just good for the neighborhood, it's been fantastic for the city and the region. I mean, this has been a big,
no doubt.
This has been a great, case study and, lived experience, and I'm very grateful for that. So.
Yeah, I would say that Franklinton in many ways is on a similar, if not equal, plane to the way the Short North is regarded these days as far as its relevance to art.
Oh, and there's been a lot of lessons learned,
and there's been a lot of lessons that you learned from that
we're able to do differently down here.
Better and
not to say there's anything wrong, but
no. Yeah, but they started it, and we had you guys had the opportunity to sort of perfect it. So, so Marty, I'd like to hear sort of a response from you about that same question, but also talk about, because I know you've done classes at Dodge Park. I want to say that you may have even like assisted with Erin Kilkenny when she did some things at the library, but I could be wrong about that. But talk about how you have tried to bring art to the kids of the neighborhood and to the senior citizens of the neighborhood.
Well, with Erin, we would meet at the library after school, and we'd put down plastic on the tables and all the pallets and put ink in all the pallets and put down paper. And the kids would just kind of drift in after school, take a seat, and started using whatever.
Just do it.
Do it. And they were free to paint, and if they had any questions, we were there, but not to direct them, but to let them do their own paintings. And very often they were very proud of it and looking forward to taking them home and putting them on the fridge.
That's a big deal. But yeah, kids' art on a refrigerator is like, that's an American staple, right?
And it's introducing them to art and being able to create their own. And that was the goal. And
then your Dodge Park work with some of the senior citizens. I remember you did I'm going to say this right, Hypatufa
class. Yeah, I've done them both at 400 and
you've done them there too. Okay, I didn't realize
at
that.
Dodge Rec.
Okay.
I teach anybody who wants to know how to make Hypatufa pots.
Yeah.
And they are pots that are made with peat moss and concrete and vermiculite, and the pots are porous and can be left outside. So you can even take buttermilk and moss, whip it through the blender, and paint it on these things, and they will all become moss covered. But they're planters that can be left outdoors.
Yeah, I've seen some of your creations with that technique, and it's pretty neat. And I do want to say, just for the record, that one of the main champions of making this possible down here, because Chris talked a lot about some of the zoning changes and accommodations that were done by the city to make this possible. Mayor Coleman was a gigantic champion for this whole movement. I know that Jim Sweeney met with him and just sort of pitched this general idea, and like we think this might work, and he bought it. He bought it
and supported
it and put money behind it and made it work. And so because of that, we've got 400 West Rich, we've got the Idea Foundry, we've got these things. And so it's no small feat that he was willing to support that and see the relevance that it could create for the neighborhood. So I think next, because you guys have both been around for a lot. Chris, I know that you were here early on in an area that did not have a lot of population. I've heard stories from you about some of the craziness that you dealt with.
Oh yeah, lots
You're
of stories.
running people off and doing this and doing that and chasing people with clubs. You were the. I remember you were kind of like affectionately called the sheriff of the neighborhood for all the obvious reasons. But so in what ways have you seen this neighborhood change over time as a result of the creation of beauty? Because advocate, beautify, connect is the mantra for the Board of Trade. And so beautifying the neighborhood is a big deal for us. And I would say that this has done that in a big way in this area. And so how would you describe the change that has happened since we've had this art movement here?
Sure. Well, back in 2004, the neighborhood was, I guess in my opinion, was forgotten. I mean, there was, a high concentration of low-income and public housing at the end of the street with Riverside Bradley and Sunshine Terrace, and those were, facilities that were essentially, in my opinion, sort of abandoned, and they became, for the residents, it became a very dangerous place that were controlled by a very small group of people, and then of course, under that control, over the decades was, horrific, substance abuse issues, narcotic sales, fear, there was just a lot of those kind of issues. And there was a large homeless population down here that was not getting the attention and the treatment that they needed. So, those were essentially, that was kind of the bottom that I believe that this area had kind of hit.
I would agree with that
time.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and I had gotten to know a lot of people, around, and, I've had my, confrontations from here and there from folks over the years, and, I'm no stranger to that and this, that, and the other. It's not as much anymore, obviously. Right before the pandemic, I chased two teenagers who were sightseeing off of a roof, and they beat the shit out of me. So, that I guess I had that coming, but, and they were, they were arrested, whatever.
They got theirs,
they got theirs. In fact, one of them pays me $70 a month in restitution until it's paid off, so it's fine. But at any rate, so, over the years, as the neighborhood became even more vacated, CMHA started to, they were, repositioning a lot of their portfolio and a lot of their housing. And, I think they were creating better opportunities for a lot of the good folks that were certainly living at Riverside Bradley.
Sure.
They had built a brand new facility over here on West Broad Street, which moved the, what was that? The Rebuilding Lives program, I believe it was.
That's correct.
And,
the YMCA.
Yeah, and they with Warner Junction, and they moved a lot of folks up there, and were able to kind of reposition, and partner and redo some of the holdings that they had on the south side of Rich Street, which is currently River and Rich today. So that there's been, that I think is a good example of, a collaboration that was successful in terms of, transitioning some of that into something different. And kudos to Casto, because they, hired dozens of local artists to create signage.
They certainly did.
Artwork. I mean, I made furniture for them. So, I mean, they've been a very good partner in the neighborhood, along with Kaufman as well, with the Alloy Arts program. They've done a really good job, and they've really stepped up in terms of embracing the culture and not trying to sort of inject what they want, their kind of,
I was on the
down here. So
I was on the East Franklinton Review Board when Casto came in with Andrew Lundberg about their signage over there, and I was impressed that they were insistent on using a local artist, and I remember advocating for the fact that it doesn't matter what the sign looks like. If Andrew Lundberg did it and Casto wants it, that's what should go up there. Let's stop the design talk right now, because this is an artist rendering of what he thinks Casto wants, and if Casto likes it, that's what it should be. And that's
well, and that's a good example of I think where the beautification kind of comes in. I mean that the fact that these other, of course, oh man, they're getting ready to build all these apartments and all this stuff going on. There's all this anxiety around that, but they have definitely been a very good advocate for just employing and embracing all of the creativity going on down here. And with the review board, I've been in front of them dozens of times for projects over the years, and that's been a great asset for the neighborhood as well, because you don't have to get approval for murals as long as there isn't sort of any kind of commercial graphic. I mean, there's all sorts of things that were baked into that plan.
Really streamlined it,
and baked into that, into their process, that have really sort of been, versus other neighborhoods that also have these design review commissions. I mean, they've been, it's been a great, it's been a great experience working with them. So,
great. Marty, would you have a response to that? How do you think art has created positives in this neighborhood?
One thing that has not been mentioned is Franklinton Friday.
Oh,
which
I let's talk about that.
That's a good point. Here we go.
Because
it's Friday, right? The obvious.
Well, it's next Friday.
It's next Friday, yeah.
and I've been a proponent of Franklinton Friday. I've advertised it. I've brought people into 400 to tour on Franklinton Friday from other parts of Columbus have come in, and I think it's the most wonderful event going on in Franklinton. I think more.
I'd say the city, but
I would agree with I agree with both of you, but yeah, I think it's a wider impact than just Franklinton. Yeah, it's incredible. But go ahead.
But seeing the crowds, I have to agree with you.
Seeing the crowds, yes, it's pretty incredible.
It's been an opportunity for many of the artists to have an exposure they would never have
Yeah.
outside of Franklinton Friday.
And the other thing I want to mention about you, Marty, is that I know that with your lifelong collection of art supplies, you've donated a lot of art supplies to local schools.
I have.
Franklinton High School, Franklinton Prep Academy, and I think others, maybe Gladden, I'm not sure, but I know for sure
A lot of my books.
the two of the high schools
Yeah.
you really gave a lot of supplies to, and made your expertise available if people had questions. So
Well, I did teach a year at the Franklinton Preparatory Academy.
okay.
And all of the students' artwork is on display in my studio. I put a molding along the top and put all of their artwork on the top of the
Yeah.
studio so that even young people can be shown.
Yes. And remind me, your Studio 102?
102.
Studio 102 at 400 West Rich is Marty Johnson's studio. So the next Friday, for Franklinton Friday, check out Studio 102.
Okay.
I'd like to kind of touch a little bit on the way one of the discussions that we always had when this really took hold and we really realized that, wow, this is a thing, the whole arts culture on this side of the freeway, we almost immediately started talking about how do we bring that momentum, that energy, that vibe west of the freeway, west of 315, into the larger residential part of the neighborhood. Because we talked about this in a previous episode, how there's a lot of like really hard physical barriers that separates the neighborhood. 315, Broad Street being a 6-lane, basically, super speedway. A lot of barriers that create this division between the neighborhood that are overcomable, but it's just a psychological thing. So, can you talk a little bit about the ways? And of course, the example of you and Aaron doing art classes at the library is one, but you were also involved with art on West Park.
Yes.
I believe, and then Franklinton Arts District also did Dance on Dakota,
And they used to do Go West,
and they used to do Go West, and then also I know that Rebecca Hunley, who is working with Roy G. Biv, is going to do that Chock-a-Block, I believe next Saturday on Dakota Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
So talk a little bit about your experience with the effort and the value of taking this vibe and making it available and present to people on the west side of the freeway.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first event we did was the National Road Yard Sale, and Carol Stewart.
That sounds right.
Actually, was facilitating, I think, that section of Broad Street, which is Route 40, which is the National Road. She was sort of organizing that area, and we thought it'd be a cool idea to set up artists in the field right by your old office at Jones, I believe, in West Broad
Jones
Street.
and Broad. Yeah.
And so we did that the first year. The usual suspects who supported our stuff came out. The following year, I believe Tommy's Diner opened for dinner, and then we ended up doing a haunted house at 937 West Broad, and that was an interesting experience. I was of course it's in like July or something, and I'm standing out front. There was this young girl walking by with, I think it was probably her grandfather. And she said, "Dad," she goes, "Can we go inside?" And he looked down at her and goes, "Girl, the devil's in there." And then they walked off, and I was like, "Okay, this is the other side of the neighborhood here. This is sort of this dynamic, which And of course, I grew up in neighborhoods like that, so it's kind of interesting to experience that. And then there was some woman yelling about how we were evil and this haunted house. I don't know, people just didn't get it. But at any rate. Yeah, I mean, Go West happened for several years after that. It ended up having live music, and I think they moved it over to, they may have closed Town Street, I believe, maybe over by Avondale and Gladden, and they have music there. So it definitely moved around over the years, and that was a great experience. I don't really remember why it kind of petered out, but from my perspective personally, I mean, I live over there now. I moved over to Glenwood back in 2000, and I guess it was the summer of 19, and living over here at McDowell and Walnut, with 2 big German Shepherds, and then, Brewdog moves in next door, and there's people everywhere. And, I had people calling the police because they thought dogs were trapped in my building. And it was just of, as the neighborhood around here started to change, I thought, well, I think it's time for me to kind of mosey on, go west myself. So, selfishly, I kind of enjoy the quiet sort of bucolic industrialness of Glenwood Avenue.
There's nothing wrong with that.
And then of course the warehouse next door to me sold, and the guy's like, "Oh, I'm going to build an apartment building here someday," and I'm like, "Great!" I just can't do. I can't get away from this shit. So it's all good, but community engagement on the west side of 315 was always a big mission of FAD, and that was something that and that could be a hard nut to crack at times, because working with Gladden, some of the other organizations over there, it was just it could be challenging to get parents to get their kids to come out to do this stuff.
It was never easy.
And I'm sure you understand this, with
never
all these
easy.
other activities you're involved with, and it and they still beat that bush today, so good for them. But it's been that was always a big focus.
I'd like you also, Chris, to touch on a little bit about because the Board of Trade, we serve as the Chamber of Commerce for the neighborhood, and one of the greatest things that I think that has come from the development down here is that Lance and that organization purchased additional buildings on Broad Street, west of the freeway.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
And so now you've got Witch Lab, you've got Franklinton Press, you've got a couple other spaces that are ready to go.
They're actually all leased out.
They're all leased out currently. So that's huge that this art movement was able to create commerce on the west side of the freeway and create businesses and activity on the sidewalk, so that it makes it easier for people to feel safe down there. So talk a little bit more about that project down there, and what all's in that building.
Yeah, so we sort of fondly refer to it as West. We've got a block of commercial buildings with some apartments up above, and 2 of the buildings. We've got 5 residential units, and I believe we have 6 commercial spaces over there. And Witch Lab was one of the first to move in. That was the old Sealy hardware store back in the day, and it's got tin ceilings. It's very it's got a lot of character. And Tiffany Boggins wanted to have she wanted to get out of her house and have a brick and mortar and a storefront.
Sure.
And just like everything we do, it was like, okay, put in some sweat equity, and and she the rent will be cheap for a while, and and it's still very affordable. But it's been that's been a great experience to be working on all of those projects over there. So we've got Witch Lab, and then next door at 1187 is a gentleman, Chris, who will be, I believe, at some point opening up some sort of a listening room record store. He's got probably 35,000 records in there, and he's got it kind of set up with couches and things. I think he's doing some private stuff right now, but he wants to get more into the public realm, I believe, possibly this summer. And then on the other side of the parking lot from that is What Fest Productions. They are a local production company that puts on a sort of an electronic music festival here in the summer.
Big deal.
They were on the south side this past year. They got a little too loud for Franklinton, so I had to kind of mosey them along. But they've got their sort of their logistical headquarters there.
Yeah.
At 1199, and they have a studio space there where they make props and things. They also, have branched out and make fixtures for restaurants and things. So they've kind of grown. Next door to that was an original tenant, Jericho's Light Club, which is sort of a storefront church organization that does a lot of outreach with homeless, and it's been very important for us to keep them there and to help them and continue to help them facilitate their mission several times a week of feeding the homeless population, and also providing other forms of outreach. So they're next door to that, and then it's Franklinton Press. They occupy 1201 and 1205 West Broad Street, and they have a massive silkscreen printing operation there, and they've been there about a year now. So it's been
they made all the logo wear for the Franklinton Special Improvement District. So
and these are all tenants that have essentially come to us looking for space. And I'm like, well, I got spots down here on West Broad. And at first, when we bought the buildings, people were like, I don't want to be down there.
Yeah.
But now it's like they're like, I'll take it. And with all of the other things that's happening there, along that sort of corridor,
it's right. It's the right time. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Getting in now is what you need to do, because that's only going to get more developed. And like you said, when that guy starts doing like more public events, and that becomes an active part of the sidewalk, that'll become a much bigger deal.
Yeah. And in the apartments, I mean, they're small studios. I consider them sort of workforce housing. I mean, we keep our rents between $475 to $550 a month over there. I mean, they're large, like 3 rooms with a kitchen and bath each, and they're great for a couple or a single person, and everything's been remodeled. And we try to and we've got other residential neighborhood units in the neighborhood that I kind of we try to keep below what things are trending.
and I appreciate you,
and folks appreciate that, and it's it's easy for us to do. So
I appreciate you bringing that up, because that's a good point. That's kind of a theme that's happened all throughout this podcast, and will continue to be a theme, because it just is. But how do we keep rents affordable for people that have lived here all along?
Oh, that's a whole
And really the point is, when you've got good landlords like you and Dewey Stokes and the Judy Boxes of the world, you can make that happen. It's the economy is tough to make work. But if you have the will and you believe in the fact that you want to help that population, you can do it. You can do it, and you guys are. And so that's something that should not go unnoticed. Marty, talk a little bit about Campbell Avenue and your Campbell Crew of 2, and some of the relationships and the network that you've built up. Picking up trash and reporting, problem houses, and you were a huge advocate for the flooding issue in your alley, which is continuing to be a problem in the neighborhood,
and it still is.
But so talk about some of the relationships that you've built, and some of the inroads that you've made with getting attention on those problems.
Well, 311 is
it works, and I'm glad you said that, because people need to know it works if you use it. Yes.
And I don't call in. I always email photographs of the problem. Mm-hmm. I figure I will get a faster response than saying to someone on the phone.
You send a photo with that submission, and
exactly.
It's a big deal.
And we have an apartment complex on the corner who has a big problem putting trash into their dumpster.
Yes.
They will send children out with the trash who cannot reach over the dumpster.
Can't reach the top, yeah.
So they just leave it on the ground, and of course animals get in. We have every kind of animal you can name in Columbus that comes out late at night. We have groundhogs, skunks, possums,
raccoons. There's a little bit of everything here.
Yes, and they're out tearing open whatever trash bag is laying on the ground for food. And it becomes a problem. At the first wind in the morning, it blows all the trash down the alleyway.
Yeah.
And
but you've been a huge advocate on addressing those issues. I know that you've worked with your neighbor Sharon and others to try to systematically address the problem.
Sharon, almost everybody knows Sharon. She walks the neighborhood, usually picking up first a trash bag and then filling it as she goes.
Yep.
And I saw how she was already picking up trash, so I corralled her into being part of the Campbell Crew of 2, which is the 2 of us.
And that's the story I wanted you to tell, because I think that just like Pauline Edwards, who was on the previous, she was on episode 3 before you guys came in. She's the same. She made it her priority to go meet the neighbors, tell the neighbors that, hey, this is a problem. I'm going to do my part, and I expect you to as well. And she says it that way. She expects them to. She's not asking them to. She says she expects them to. And I think that's an important distinction. And talking about, even though Franklinton has a lot of issues with trash and illegal dumping, there are people here that absolutely care. It's not everybody making this problem. It's probably the smallest number of people making the problem, and a lot of people are trying to solve it, and you're one of them.
And I'm not the only one. I can think of Heidi, and
Yes.
Heidi and
Rebecca, Heidi,
Rebecca.
a bunch of people. Yeah.
And they rally around a problem, like with the apartment house. They not only get 311 from me, but also from Heidi and from Rebecca. So when they're at 311 getting these calls, they know it's not just one person complaining.
Yeah. Yeah.
One person can complain 100 times, but it only counts as one complaint if it's from the same person.
Yeah.
And when we learned that was when we started sharing.
Everybody get on this. Yeah. Everybody
Chris,
get on.
I want you to call 311 on
Right,
this. That's
right.
the kind of
All right.
networking that we have done.
In my street, I live on West Park Avenue, and our street works the same way. If there's an issue in the alley, there's probably about 7 neighbors that send an email all at the same time. And so then they know, hey, this is an issue not for just this house, but for 6 other houses. So, yeah. I appreciate you sharing that, because I really like to illustrate the point that this is a great community, and that there's a lot of neighbors that do work together, and they do communicate.
Rebecca Huntley, for about 3 years, we had a garden tour of Franklinton.
And it was
And
beautiful.
last year, she did it in conjunction with the Roy B. Gift, and they had art at each one of this locations as well.
And one of
was a
those
garden and
plein air
art.
artists actually did a painting of my house that I purchased from Roy G. Biv, because it was such a nice painting of my house.
And that's how art is coming
Yeah.
into the
and
Western Franklinton.
So you tied that all together. Thank you for doing that. If somebody was going to call you and say, tell me about Franklinton in just like a brief summary, what would be your description of that summary today?
Well, for me, it's a small community.
Yeah.
And we seem to know one another a lot more than we would, say, if I lived up in the short north. I don't think there's the cohesion as there is down here.
Yeah.
I see that at the Healthy Living Center when we have 100 people show up to learn how to prepare a healthy meal. We served it. They were able to enjoy the meal, and then go home with a bag
Go home
full
with the
of
ingredients.
all the
Yeah.
ingredients,
Make it
so
for your
that they can
family.
make it for the family.
Yeah.
After seeing a chef demonstrate it.
Yeah.
So
That's a great example of the level of participation that people are willing to put forth if a program is offered where it's accessible to them. So, for example, they could walk to that.
Yeah.
Easily walk to that. And I'm glad you brought that example up, because the Healthy Living Center is a huge component of what makes this neighborhood function.
And since the pandemic, they have gone a different route, but it still continues. We have drive-through pickup.
Yeah.
You get a folder with a QR code in it.
Yeah.
You go to your computer or telephone, and you see the video of the chef doing the demonstration.
Yeah.
And you've got the food already, so now you make it.
I mean-
and they ask you to take a photograph and send it in.
Yeah.
And
Well, and they have that place set up like the Food Network. So they've got the cameras where you can actually, you see the aerial shot of what the cook's doing, and you get.
that's
get
the way it's been.
Yeah. So it's a very professional setup. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I know you've been part of that for a very long time. Chris, what would be your answer?
Well, my answer would be, keep an open mind and enjoy the sights, and don't park in my parking lots. So, that's pretty much how
That is the summary I expected from Chris Sherman.
and have a White Claw, or come down to
Yeah.
Land Grant and grab a beer, and,
That's beautiful, man.
you might find a party at the little house, and, it's
Yeah.
always a good time.
Well, I'll tell you, and Marty, you talked about how it's such a cohesive neighborhood, and Jim and I were talking the other day, and we kind of joked. We said, between Jim and myself, Chris Sherman, Chris Howell, and Zach Henkel, what would be the degrees of separation to anybody else in Central Ohio? And it wouldn't be much. It really wouldn't be much. And that's just a neat point that this neighborhood, we do communicate, we do collaborate, we do understand the challenges, we do understand the compromises that need to happen to make sure the challenges get addressed properly. And you guys are both textbook examples of people who understand that, work towards that goal, and do everything every day in your power to make it happen. So
it's being engaged.
Being engaged, yes, that's the best way to describe it. Yes. Do you guys have any other final thoughts before I wrap this up? Because I could actually go on for this conversation for about another 2 hours, but I'm sensitive to the time that we've allotted for this. So, any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
Well, I've been at 400 West First Street for 10 years. I'm
yes,
looking forward to the next 10.
You've been a very good tenant.
Yes.
You don't complain much, and
The only thing is the dust.
Well, and that'll get better.
Yeah.
I hope so.
As the building airs out over the years. But yeah.
Chris, what's your final thought, man?
Well, I again, thank you for letting me participate in this stuff. First time I've ever done something like this, so that's kind of neat. And we look forward to the next, at least for me, I guess the next 18 years.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens. No matter what I do, I'll always be around here, and I obviously have property here, and it's a for me it's very important, and it's sort of a requirement of myself to sort of continue to see the creative endeavors and to sort of keep that spirit alive. So as long as I'm running around these parts, that's going to be my mission. So
I couldn't be happier to hear that. You guys are both great friends, so thank you for doing this with us. I'm going to do a couple of thank yous, and then we're going to do a little toast here to wrap this up, okay? So I hope that you have enjoyed this episode as much as I have. This has been a great conversation, really getting to the core of what Franklinton is known for today. We spent the first 3 episodes talking about a lot of history, and we addressed a lot of challenges, and we're always going to address challenges no matter how current or modern the episode is. But the point is that Franklinton is a neighborhood full of grit and full of people who aren't willing, or who are willing. Let me rephrase that. Aren't willing to take the status quo and are willing to roll up their sleeves. And so we have plenty of people like that in this neighborhood, and these 2 guests today, Marty and Chris, are shining examples of that.
thank you.
So to bring this story to your attention, we want to thank Jimfia Productions for all of the work that they do with this incredibly sophisticated equipment, making us sound good. Franklintennial Committee for loving Jim's idea and supporting the fact that we wanted to do this and helped us make it happen with funding. Land Grant for the beautiful venue that they allow us to use to make sure that this podcast goes off well and has a nice atmosphere. And our financial sponsors, Kaufman Development and Casto, who have both been integral development partners in the revitalization of the neighborhood. And then I want to thank one more time the Transit Art interns that are assisting with Jimfia today. They're through Gladden Community House. Transit Arts was started by a woman named Jackie Calderon, who has some history in the neighborhood because her son Josh helped co-found Bottoms Up Coffee. And the interns are Ella Fairbaugh, Grace Turner, Trinity Maddox, and Delson Stone Queen. So thanks to all 4 of them for their participation and for taking advantage of this learning experience, because anytime you can see something happening right in front of your eyes, that's the best way to learn about how to do it. So we're grateful that Jimfia wanted to bring them onto the team here, and it's been a lot of fun. So with that, again, I'm Trent Smith. I'm the executive director of the Franklinton Board of Trade, and I couldn't be happier to be hosting these episodes and having great conversations with people that I love in the neighborhood. So, Marty, Chris, you guys got your drinks?
We do.
Let's toast to Franklinton 225. Happy birthday.
Absolutely. Happy birthday, Franklinton. We love you.